Get us the owner right now, Dad yelled at the country club. She does not belong here, Mom added. Remove her immediately. I stood quietly while the manager smiled, asking, "Ma'am, how would you like to handle your family's membership?" Their faces dropped. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. My name is Aaliyah, and I am 32 years old. Most people look at me and see a woman in simple leggings and a windbreaker with no makeup and hair tied back in a messy bun. They assume I am invisible. My family certainly does. The Onyx Club is the kind of place where old money goes to feel safe from the realities of the world. It sits on the most exclusive coastline of Oak Bluffs, with membership fees starting at $100,000 a year. The air smells of expensive cologne and sea salt. On this particular Saturday, the main ballroom was decked out in white roses and crystals for the engagement party of my younger sister Bianca and her fiancé Preston. I had not been invited. In fact, I had been explicitly told to stay away, so I did not ruin the aesthetic. I was not there for the party, though. I was there because I had spent the morning walking the 18-hole golf course with the head groundskeeper inspecting the irrigation system. I was thirsty and tired, so I cut through the main lobby to grab a bottle of water from the bar. That was my mistake. The double doors to the ballroom were open, and my father Desmond was standing right there holding a glass of scotch and holding court with a group of Preston's wealthy relatives. He spotted me instantly. His eyes went wide not with recognition or love, but with pure, unadulterated panic. He excused himself from the group and marched toward me, his expensive Italian loafers clicking aggressively on the marble floor. He blocked my path before I could even reach the bar. "What the hell are you doing here, Aaliyah?" He hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Look at you. You look like you just crawled out of a dumpster. You are polluting the air in here." I looked down at my running shoes, which had a bit of grass on them from the course. "I am just getting water, Dad," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I am leaving in 5 minutes." He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "You are leaving now. Do you have any idea who is in that room? Preston's family dates back to the Mayflower. They do not need to see Bianca's sister looking like the help. Get out before security drags you out." My father's grip on my arm was bruising, but the look on my mother Patricia's face hurt worse. She emerged from the crowd of well-dressed guests, like a shark scenting blood. Her face was perfectly made up, but her eyes were cold and dead. She did not see a daughter. She saw a stain on her reputation. She stepped right up to me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "You have some nerve showing your face here," she hissed. Her voice was low, but it carried the weight of 1,000 disappointments. "Look at you. You are a disaster. We finally got into this club. We finally secured a match with Preston, and here you are looking like you just crawled out of a sewer." I tried to speak to tell her I was just checking the property, but she cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. "I do not want to hear your excuses, Aaliyah. Just looking at you makes me sick. You are going to ruin everything. If Preston sees you looking like this, he will think this family has failed genes. He will think we come from trash. We worked too hard to scrub the poverty off this family name for you to drag us back down. Get back to the slums where you belong. You are not one of us. You never were." She was holding a crystal flute of expensive vintage champagne. I saw her knuckles turn white around the stem. Without a second of hesitation, she flicked her wrist forward in a sharp, violent motion. The cold gold liquid hit my face and chest, soaking into my windbreaker and dripping down my neck. It was sticky and smelled of yeast and money. The shock of it made me gasp, and the cold wetness seeped instantly through my shirt to my skin. My mother smiled a cruel, satisfied smile, as if she had just performed a public service. "Now you definitely have to leave," she said, wiping a single drop from her own hand. "You are making a mess. You look like a drowned rat." From behind her, a high-pitched giggle cut through the tension. It was my younger sister, Bianca. She was holding her phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at my wet, humiliated face. The flash blinded me for a second. "Oh my God, you guys, look at this," Bianca narrated to her phone screen, her voice pitched into that fake influencer tone she used for her 50,000 followers. "My jealous older sister literally crashed my engagement party. She is so obsessed with me, it is scary. Look at her. She looks like she sleeps under a bridge. She is soaking wet and refusing to leave. Security is on the way, but I just had to show you guys the length some people will go to when they are miserable and broke." She laughed again and stepped closer, zooming in on the champagne dripping from my chin. "Say hi to the internet, Aaliyah. Tell them why you cannot just let me be happy. Tell them why you always have to be the black sheep." "Do not touch me," I said quietly. But Bianca just laughed and circled me like a vulture, getting every angle of my humiliation for her audience. "See, guys, this is why we do not invite her to things. She is just toxic." My father finally let go of my arm, but only to push me backward toward the door. "You heard your mother," he growled. "Get out. You are embarrassing your sister." I stood there dripping wet, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me. My mother looked at me with disgust. My sister looked at me as content for her social media. My father looked at me like a liability. I wiped the champagne from my eyes. I did not cry. I would not give them that satisfaction. They thought this was the end of me, but they had no idea they were standing in the middle of my empire. The silence that followed the splash of champagne did not last long. It was shattered by my father Desmond, who turned from me with a look of absolute revulsion. He did not look at me like a father looks at a daughter. He looked at me like a customer who had found a cockroach in his expensive soup. He spun around, searching the room with wild, angry eyes, until he spotted a senior staff member near the entrance. "Manager," he bellowed, his voice booming off the high vaulted ceilings and causing several guests to jump. "We need a manager over here immediately! This is an outrage!" He pointed a shaking finger at me as if I were a contagious disease. "How did this street trash get past the front gate? We pay a premium for exclusivity. We pay for security. I want to know who was manning the door, and I want them fired." He was shaking with rage. To Desmond, appearance was everything. He had spent his entire life curating an image of black excellence and high society perfection. Having his disowned daughter standing there in a wet windbreaker and running shoes was not just an annoyance. It was an attack on his brand. He whipped out his phone, likely preparing to call his lawyer or perhaps the police, but Preston stepped in before he could dial. Preston adjusted his silk tie and stepped forward with the entitled swagger of a man who has never been told no in his life. He placed a calming hand on my father's shoulder, but his eyes were fixed on me, cold and mocking. "Save your breath," Desmond Preston said loudly, ensuring his voice carried to the back of the room. "The staff here is clearly incompetent. We do not need a manager. We need the person who signs the checks." He snapped his fingers at a passing waiter who froze in terror. "You, boy, go get the owner. Right now. Tell them Preston Vanderhoven is waiting and he is not happy." My father nodded vigorously, emboldened by his future son-in-law's arrogance. "Yes, get the owner down here. I am a VIP member. I demand an explanation for this security breach. This is a private event for the elite, not a homeless shelter." My mother, Patricia, chimed in, her voice shrill. She was busy dabbing at her dress, checking for any stray drops of champagne, even though she was the one who had thrown it. She looked at the security guards who were rushing toward us. "Remove her!" she shrieked, pointing at me with a manicured nail. "Drag her out if you have to. She is trespassing. She is mentally unstable and obsessed with our family. We have a restraining order pending." It was a lie, of course. There was no restraining order. But my mother never let the truth get in the way of a scene. She turned to the guests who were whispering behind their hands. "I am so sorry, everyone. She is a distant relative with drug problems. We have tried to help her, but she refuses to change." I stood perfectly still, letting the champagne drip from my hem onto the marble floor. I did not defend myself. I did not scream back. I just watched them dig their own graves. Preston laughed a cruel barking sound. He turned to the crowd grinning as if this were all a show put on for his amusement. "Listen up, everyone," he announced. "My father-in-law here pays $100,000 a year for this membership. $100,000. That pays for the privilege of not seeing people like this. That pays for a certain caliber of company. If the owner of this club thinks they can take our money and let the riffraff wander in off the street, they are sorely mistaken. I want the owner here in 2 minutes, or I am pulling my family's funding, and I am taking every investor in this room with me." The security guards finally reached us, breathless and looking terrified. They looked at my father's red face, they looked at Preston's sneer, and then they looked at me. I saw the moment of recognition in the head guard's eyes. He froze his hand, hovering over his radio. He looked confused and terrified, but not of my father. He opened his mouth to speak, but Preston cut him off. "Don't just stand there, you idiot. I said get the owner. Call them. Page them. Whatever you do. I want to look the owner in the eye and ask them why they run such a sloppy establishment." My father crossed his arms. "I am waiting. Get the owner now." The heavy oak doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open with a definitive thud. The sound was sharp enough to cut through the murmurs of the crowd. A man in an impeccably tailored navy suit strode in. His name was Marcus, the general manager of the Onyx Club, and he had the kind of presence that made people stop talking. He walked with a purpose, his eyes scanning the scene, until they landed on our little drama in the center of the room. My father Desmond seemed to inflate with self-importance at the sight of him. Finally he boomed, gesturing wildly in my direction. "Someone with authority. You there. Manager, get over here. We have a situation." Marcus did not rush. He approached our group with a calm, measured pace that only infuriated my father more. Desmond pointed a shaking finger directly at my face. "This woman is trespassing," he shouted, spittle flying from his lips. "She has assaulted my family verbally, and she is making a scene. I want her removed from the premises immediately. Call the police. Press charges. Do whatever you have to do, but get her out of my sight. She is ruining my daughter's engagement party. Look at her, she is dripping wet and filthy. It is disgusting." Preston stepped forward, swirling his drink, swirling his arrogance. He looked Marcus up and down, assessing his worth. "You must be the help," Preston sneered. "Listen to me very carefully. My family has been members here since before you were born. If this woman is not gone in 30 seconds, I will personally ensure you never work in this town again. Do you understand me? Get her out. Now." My mother, Patricia, nodded vigorously, her face twisted in a mask of righteous indignation. "Yes, remove her. She is a stain on this establishment. We pay for exclusivity, not for street trash to wander in and ruin our events." Marcus stopped a few feet away from us. He looked at my father's red face. He looked at Preston's sneering lip. He looked at my mother's cruel eyes. And then he looked at me. His expression softened instantly, transforming from professional stoicism to genuine respect. He ignored my father completely. He walked right past Preston as if he were invisible. He stepped around my mother without even glancing at her. He stopped directly in front of me and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of deference that sent a shockwave through the room. "Good afternoon, Madam Chairman," Marcus said, his voice clear and respectful, ringing through the suddenly silent ballroom. "I apologize for the delay. I was reviewing the quarterly reports as you requested." He gestured to a waiter who immediately rushed forward with a fresh, dry towel. Marcus took it and offered it to me with both hands. "Would you like to proceed to the VIP suite to dry off and have lunch first, or shall we review the financial ledgers immediately as planned? The board is ready for you whenever you are." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy. It was suffocating. My father's mouth fell open, his finger still pointing at me, but now trembling uncontrollably. Preston dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot, but no one moved to clean it up. My mother looked as if she had been slapped, her eyes darting between Marcus and me in total confusion. Bianca stopped recording her phone, lowering slowly to her side, her mouth forming a perfect O of shock. Madam Chairman, my father whispered the words sounding foreign on his tongue. What did you call her? Marcus turned to him slowly, his face cold and professional once more. I addressed her by her title, sir. This is Aaliyah Vance, the majority shareholder and chairman of the board of the Onyx Group. She owns this club. She owns the land we are standing on. And she owns the building you are currently partying in. In fact, she signed off on your membership renewal last week. Although after today, I imagine that might be subject to review. I took the towel from Marcus and patted my face dry. I looked at my father, who had turned a sickly shade of gray. I looked at Preston, who looked like he was going to be sick. I looked at my mother, who was clutching her pearls as if they were a lifeline. Hello, Dad, I said, my voice calm and steady. You wanted to speak to the owner. I am listening. The silence in the ballroom shattered not with an apology, but with a laugh. It started as a low chuckle from Preston and quickly escalated into a loud, braying guffaw that echoed off the crystal chandeliers. He shook his head, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye as he looked from Marcus to me and back again. Oh, that is rich, Preston said, his voice dripping with condescension. That is truly rich. For a second there, you almost had me. Chairman? Owner? Please. Do you really think we are that stupid? He turned to the crowd, gesturing at me with his empty glass. Look at her, people. Look at the cheap windbreaker. Look at the messy hair. Does this look like a billionaire to you? Does this look like the owner of the Onyx Group? My father seemed to shake himself out of his shock, latching onto Preston's words like a drowning man grabbing a life raft. His face flushed, returning to its previous shade of angry red. You are right, Preston, Desmond said, straightening his jacket. This is a trick. It has to be. I know this girl. I raised her. She dropped out of college. She has never held a real job in her life. She is penniless. He took a step toward Marcus, his finger jabbing the air. I do not know what game you are playing, manager, or how much she paid you to say that, but I am not buying it. Preston stepped closer to me, invading my personal space again, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and malice. We all know how these things work, sweetheart, he sneered. You are a front, a face. Or maybe you are just sleeping with the real owner, and he lets you play pretend. That is it, isn't it? You found some old rich man to take care of you, and now you are parading around acting like you earned something. It is pathetic, really. My mother, Patricia, let out a breath of relief, her delusion firmly back in place. Of course, she sniffed. That makes perfect sense. She always was manipulative. Sleeping her way to the top is exactly the kind of low-class behavior I would expect from her. Aaliyah, stop this charade right now. Admit you are lying, and maybe we will not press charges for fraud. You are embarrassing yourself. Bianca laughed nervously, aiming her phone camera back at me. Oh my God, imagine lying about owning a whole country club, she said to her followers. That is so cringe. Like, who does that? She is clearly having a mental breakdown, guys. This is so sad, but also kind of hilarious. Marcus stepped forward, his face stony, ready to intervene, but I held up a hand to stop him. I did not need him to fight this battle. I looked at my father, who was now grinning with a twisted sort of triumph, confident that he had uncovered my deception. You really believe that? I asked softly. You believe I am a fraud rather than accept that I made something of myself? Desmond laughed, a harsh, barking sound. I know you, Aaliyah. You are a quitter. You are weak. You do not have the brains or the grit to build an empire. You are nothing. So stop the act. Get out of here before I have the real police arrested for impersonating a business owner. You are not fooling anyone. Preston crossed his arms, looking down at me with pure disdain. You heard him. Run along now, little girl. Go find your sugar daddy. The adults have a party to finish. The morning sun hit the polished brass sign of the Onyx Club, making it gleam like gold, but the warmth didn't reach the faces of Desmond and Patricia as they stood at the main gate. They were dressed for a leisurely Sunday brunch, Desmond in his cream linen suit, and Patricia in a floral dress that cost more than my first car. They approached the security kiosk with the entitled air of people who own the world. Desmond flashed his membership card at the sensor, expecting the usual green light and the gate to swing open. Instead, the sensor beeped a harsh red error tone. He frowned and swiped it again. Another angry beep. "Open the gate!" Desmond barked at the security guard, a young man named Kevin, who had witnessed the entire spectacle yesterday. Kevin didn't flinch. He stayed inside the booth, his face impassive. "I am afraid I cannot do that, sir," Kevin said, his voice polite but firm. "Your membership has been suspended." "Suspended?" Patricia shrieked, clutching her designer handbag. "Do you know who we are? We have been members for 20 years. This must be a mistake. A computer glitch. Fix it immediately." Desmond slammed his hand against the glass of the booth. "Do not play games with me, boy. I will have your job for this. Open this gate right now." Kevin slid a printed document through the small opening in the window. "It is not a glitch, sir," he said calmly. "According to the directive from the board, your membership has been frozen effective immediately. The reason listed is non-payment of dues for the past 6 months and violation of the club's code of conduct regarding member behavior." Desmond snatched the paper, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Non-payment," he sputtered. "That is a lie. I pay my dues. I am Desmond Vance. I have never missed a payment in my life. And code of conduct, I was the one assaulted yesterday by that trespasser. This is harassment. I will sue this club into the ground." Patricia looked over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the document. "Oh my God, Desmond," she whispered. "It says here we owe $50,000 in back dues and penalties. How is that possible? You said the business was doing well. You said the accounts were handled." Desmond crumpled the paper in his fist. "It is a clerical error, Patricia," he snapped, though beads of sweat were starting to form on his forehead. "Or it is that girl. She hacked the system. That must be it. She is trying to embarrass us again. Listen to me, guard. You tell whoever is in charge that I am not leaving until this gate opens. I have a tea time in 20 minutes and my wife has a spa appointment. We are not going to be inconvenienced by your incompetence." Kevin picked up his phone. "Sir, if you do not step away from the gate, I will be forced to call the police for trespassing. The directive is very clear. You are not permitted on the premises until the outstanding balance is settled and the board reviews your case. You have 24 hours to retrieve any personal items from your lockers before they are donated to charity." "Police," Patricia gasped, grabbing Desmond's arm. "Desmond, we cannot have the police here. Think of the neighbors. Think of Preston's family. If they see us being arrested at our own club, it will be the end of us. We have to go. We will call our lawyer." Desmond looked at the closed gate, then at the resolute guard, and finally at his terrified wife. He threw the crumpled paper onto the ground. "This isn't over," he yelled, shaking his fist at the security camera. "You tell that fraud, Aaliyah, that she hasn't won anything. I will own this place by the time I am done with her. I will burn it down if I have to." He stormed back to his car, Patricia trailing behind him, looking smaller and more fragile than she ever had before. As they drove away, tires screeching on the asphalt, I watched the feed from my office monitor sipping my tea. It was just the beginning. The luxury Mercedes looked like a spaceship landed in the middle of a war zone as Desmond steered it down the pothole-ridden streets of Aaliyah's old neighborhood. Patricia clutched the door handle with a white-knuckled grip, her eyes darting nervously at the boarded-up windows and graffiti-stained walls passing by. "I cannot believe she is making us come here," Patricia hissed, checking the lock on her door for the 3rd time. "This place is a cesspool. It smells like failure." Desmond gritted his teeth, swerving around a discarded mattress on the curb. "She thinks she can hide behind a computer screen and ruin my life," he growled. "She thinks because she lives in the gutter, she is untouchable. I will drag her out of that apartment by her ear if I have to. She is going to fix the club membership and she is going to apologize to Preston publicly." He slammed the car into park in front of a crumbling brick building that looked as if a strong wind might topple it. A group of teenagers on the corner stopped talking to watch the two middle-aged people in expensive clothes march up the cracked walkway. Desmond did not care. He was fueled by a rage that blinded him to danger. He stormed up the stairs to the second floor, stopping in front of apartment 2B. He pounded on the peeling wood with his fist, the sound echoing like gunshots in the narrow hallway. "Aaliyah, open this door right now," Desmond bellowed. "I know you are in there. Stop playing games. You think you are smart hacking the Onyx Club system. You think you can embarrass me. Open up before I kick this door down." Patricia stood behind him, holding a scented handkerchief to her nose to block out the smell of stale cooking oil and damp carpet. "Tell her we are cutting her off completely. Desmond," she shouted. "Tell her she is dead to us." Desmond pounded again harder this time, rattling the door in its frame. "Come out here, you ungrateful wretch. We know you are hiding." The door across the hall creaked open slowly. An elderly woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen everything stepped out. She wore a faded housecoat and slippers, but she held herself with more dignity than Patricia ever could. She looked at Desmond's red face and Patricia's terrified expression and shook her head slowly. "You folks are making a lot of noise for a Sunday morning," the woman said, her voice raspy but steady. "You are going to wake the baby downstairs." Desmond spun around, his chest heaving. "Mind your own business. We are looking for our daughter. We know she lives here. Tell her to come out and face the consequences of her actions." The woman let out a dry laugh that sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "Your daughter," she repeated. "You must be the parents she never talks about, the ones who think the sun rises and sets on their command. Well, you are barking up the wrong tree. That apartment has been empty for a long time." Patricia stepped forward, her heels clicking on the linoleum. "Do not lie for her. We send her mail here. We know this is her address. She is probably cowering inside right now." The woman leaned against her doorframe, crossing her arms. "You send mail, but you never visit, do you? If you did, you would know. Aaliyah moved out of here 2 years ago, and she did not leave in a taxi or a bus." A helicopter landed on the roof of the parking garage next door. A black private helicopter. Men in suits came and carried her bags like she was royalty. She took off into the sky while you two were probably busy polishing your silverware. Desmond froze. "A helicopter." He whispered the word, sounding absurd in this hallway. "That is impossible. She is broke. She has nothing." The woman scoffed, looking at him with pure pity. "She bought this building before she left. She bought the whole block so she could keep the rent low for the rest of us. She is the landlord now. You are standing on her property screaming at a door she hasn't opened in 24 months. What kind of parents are you that you do not even know your child lives in the sky while you are down here searching in the dirt? Get out of here before I call her security. And trust me, you do not want to meet them." She slammed her door shut, leaving Desmond and Patricia standing in the silence of their own ignorance. The glass walls of my penthouse offered a panoramic view of the city, but my eyes were fixed on the thin white scar running along the back of my left hand. It was a small mark, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look, but every time I touched it, I could feel the rain. I could feel the cold, biting wind of that night 10 years ago. I was 22 years old back then, fresh out of college with dreams that didn't fit into my father's spreadsheet. I was sitting in the same leather armchair I sat in every evening, sipping a glass of water. But my mind was transported back to the driveway of my childhood home. The rain was torrential, a wall of water that soaked through my clothes in seconds. My father, Desmond, stood on the porch, dry and angry under the shelter of the overhang. He held my suitcase in one hand and my future in the other. "You are ungrateful," he shouted, his voice booming over the thunder. "You are selfish. The boy is perfect for you. His father owns the biggest construction firm in the state. This merger could save us. It could save everything I built, and you are throwing it away because of what? Love. Independence. Those are fairy tales for poor people, Aaliyah. We have a legacy to protect." I stood there shivering, my hair plastered to my face. "I do not love him, Dad," I screamed back. my voice lost in the wind. He is cruel. He treats people like dirt, just like you do. I want to build my own life. I want to start my own business. I don't want to be a bargaining chip in your merger. Desmond didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. He wound up and threw my suitcase as hard as he could. It tumbled down the wet driveway, the zipper bursting open, spilling my clothes into the mud. My books, my sketches, my few precious belongings were instantly ruined. "Then get out," he roared. "If you do not want to be part of this family, then you are nothing to me. Do not come back until you are ready to do your duty. Do not ask for a dime. You are dead to me." He turned his back and slammed the heavy oak door, the sound final and devastating. I scrambled to gather my things in the mud, cutting my hand on the broken clasp of the suitcase. The blood mixed with the rain running down my wrist, but I didn't feel the pain. All I felt was a cold, hard resolve forming in my chest. I looked at that closed door, at the warm light spilling from the windows, where my mother and sister were probably watching TV, pretending I didn't exist. I stood up, clutching my muddy clothes to my chest. I made a promise to the rain. I made a promise to the scar forming on my hand. "I will not just survive," I whispered into the storm. "I will thrive. I will build something so big, so powerful, that you will have to look up to see me. And one day I will come back, not to beg, not to apologize, but to buy you out. I will own the roof over your head. I will own the ground you walk on. And you will know exactly who I am." I snapped back to the present, the city lights twinkling below me like diamonds. I rubbed the scar with my thumb. That night I walked 3 miles to the bus station. I slept on a bench. I started with nothing. Now I sat at the top of the world, and tomorrow I was going to keep my promise. I picked up my phone and dialed my broker. "Execute the purchase," I said, my voice steady. "Buy the debt, buy the mortgage, buy it all." I pulled my rental car up to the wrought iron gates of my parents' estate in Buckhead. It looked exactly the same as the night I was kicked out 10 years ago. The manicured lawn was cut to military precision, and the imposing white columns stood like sentries guarding a fortress of secrets. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text from my mother, Patricia. "Dinner is ready. Please come in the side door." I stared at the screen and let out a dry laugh. Even when inviting me back for a so-called reconciliation, they could not bring themselves to let me walk through the grand front entrance like a guest. I was still the secret shame they wanted to smuggle in through the service entry. I entered the dining room to find a scene straight out of a magazine. The long mahogany table was set for 5 with the good china and crystal glasses usually reserved for senators or bishops. Desmond sat at the head of the table, looking less like the man who had screamed at an empty apartment door yesterday and more like a benevolent patriarch. Patricia was fussing over a centerpiece of white lilies. Bianca and Preston were already seated, holding hands and looking smug. The air smelled of roasted lamb and deception. "We wanted to clear the air," Desmond started before I even sat down. "Yesterday was unfortunate. Tempers flared, emotions ran high. But family remains family." That was his version of an apology for publicly humiliating me and hunting me down in the slums. Patricia chimed in, pouring wine with a hand that shook slightly. "We want to move past this, Aaliyah. We want you to be part of Bianca's big day. We want to heal." I sat down, but didn't touch the napkin. I waited. The food was served, but nobody ate. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Then came the pivot. Patricia slid a blue velvet folder across the polished wood table toward me. "We know you have done well for yourself," she said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl. "And we are so proud. That is why we want to give you the honor of helping your sister." I opened the folder. It wasn't a wedding invitation. It was a loan application from a private bank. A massive one. "What is this?" I asked, my voice flat. "It is a co-signing agreement," Desmond explained casually, picking up his fork. "The wedding costs have escalated slightly. The Onyx Club requires a substantial deposit, and with the misunderstanding about our membership status, we need a guarantor to secure the venue booking. You want me to sign a loan for a wedding at a club you are currently banned from? I asked incredulously. Preston scoffed, rolling his eyes. We aren't banned. It is a temporary administrative freeze. Once the deposit is paid, they will unlock the account. My trust fund is tied up in international bonds right now, or I would do it myself. Consider this an investment in your social standing, Aaliyah. Having your name attached to the Vanderhoven wedding will open doors for you that you didn't even know existed. We need $300,000, Bianca added, checking her manicure. And since you are apparently so rich now, it shouldn't be a problem. Unless you were lying about your money. Patricia leaned forward, her eyes hard and calculating. Sign the paper, Aaliyah. Show us you are still part of this family. Show us you aren't the selfish little girl we threw out. Help your sister secure her future. She is marrying a Vanderhoven. This lifts all of us up, including you. Don't be jealous. Just sign. Preston leaned back in his chair, kicking his designer loafers up onto the polished mahogany table right next to the untouched centerpiece of lilies. He swirled his wineglass, looking at me, through half-closed eyes, as if I were a speck of dirt he couldn't quite flick away. You are hesitating, he drawled, a smirk playing on his lips. That is adorable, really. Most people would kill for the chance to attach their name to a Vanderhoven event. Do you have any idea how old my family money is? My ancestors were founding banks, while yours were probably still learning to read. He took a slow sip of wine, his eyes never leaving my face. This wedding is going to be the social event of the decade. Governors are coming, senators, people who run this country, and you are worried about a little signature on a loan application. It is pathetic. My trust fund unlocks in 6 months. Once that happens, this 300,000 will look like pocket change. I will pay it off in an afternoon. You are not giving us money, Aaliyah. You are buying a ticket to relevance. You are buying the right to say you are related to me. Bianca giggled, reaching over to stroke his arm. He is right, you know. Preston is doing you a favor. He could have asked his friends from Yale. He could have asked his business partners. But he let us ask you because he wanted to give you a chance to be useful. Don't blow it. You always ruin everything. Preston laughed, a cruel sound that grated on my nerves. Exactly. We are throwing you a bone here. Sign the paper. Be a good little sister for once. Help us secure the venue, and maybe, just maybe, we will let you sit at a table near the back. Far away from the cameras, of course, but at least you will be in the room. You should be thanking me. Helping a prestigious family like mine is the biggest honor you will ever have in your sad little life, you bastard child. The room went quiet. Even my parents looked uncomfortable at the slur, but they didn't say a word. They didn't defend me. They just watched, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to sign. I looked at Preston, at his arrogant face, his casual cruelty. I looked at my parents, who were willing to let him insult me just to get what they wanted. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I just reached into my pocket and tapped the screen of my phone, ensuring the voice recorder app was still running. I looked Preston dead in the eye and smiled, a slow, cold smile that made his smirk falter for just a second. You seem very confident about that trust fund, Preston, I said, my voice steady. International bonds, you said. Tied up for 6 months. That is a very specific timeline. It is almost like you have rehearsed it. Preston scoffed, taking his feet off the table. Of course I am confident. It is my money. Now stop stalling and sign. Or get out. We don't have time for your jealousy. I did not sign the loan application that night. Instead, I walked out of my parents' dining room with the recording of Preston's insults burning a digital hole in my pocket. The next morning, I sat in the back of a black SUV parked along the waterfront, waiting for a man named Reynolds. He was a private investigator who specialized in high-stakes financial vetting, and I had paid him a small fortune to turn Preston's life inside out. When the door opened and Reynolds slid into the seat next to me, he looked grim. He did not waste time with small talk. He simply placed a thick manila envelope on the leather seat between us. You are going to want to see this, Reynolds said, his voice gravelly and serious. Your instincts were right. The guy is a fraud. But it is worse than just lying about money. He is dangerous. I opened the file. The first document was a legal letter from the Vanderhoven Family Trust dated 5 years ago. It was a formal notice of disownment. Preston had not just been cut off from the family fortune. He had been legally exiled. He has been lying to everyone, Reynolds explained, tapping the document with a thick finger. There is no trust fund unlocking in 6 months. There are no international bonds. His parents cut him off completely 5 years ago after he stole his grandmother's jewelry to pay off a gambling debt in Las Vegas. He is not a wealthy heir waiting for his inheritance. He is a broke gambling addict with a famous last name. I flipped through the pages staring at the wreckage of Preston's financial life. There were court judgments for unpaid loans, defaults on credit cards, and a police report from a casino in Atlantic City. It was a pattern of pathological lying and theft. Reynolds leaned in closer, his voice dropping. Here is the kicker. He owes money to some very bad people in New York. Loan sharks. The kind who do not send demand letters. They send guys to break your legs. That $300,000 he wants you to sign for. It is not for the wedding venue. It is to pay off the interest on his debt so he can buy himself another month of breathing room. I felt a cold chill settle in my stomach. Preston was not just an arrogant jerk, he was a desperate predator. He had targeted my family because he smelled their desperation for social status. He knew my father would do anything to be associated with the Vanderhoven name, and he was exploiting that vanity to save his own skin. He was gold-digging my parents to pay off mobsters. So the wedding is a scam, I asked, looking at a photo of Preston pawning a watch. It is a lifeline, Reynolds confirmed. He needs the wedding to happen so he can get his name on your father's assets. He has been pushing your dad to put him on the deed to the house as a wedding gift. Once he has that, he will leverage the property against his debts and disappear. He does not love your sister. He looks at her and sees a human shield against his creditors. I closed the file, my hand resting on the evidence that would destroy my sister's dreams. My parents were about to sell their souls to a man who would leave them destitute. I looked out the window at the gray water. Keep digging, I told Reynolds. I want everything. By the time I am done with him, he won't even be able to get a library card. The sound of knuckles rapping on the heavy oak door of the guest bedroom startled me from my thoughts. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the file Reynolds had given me, the weight of Preston's deception heavy in my hands. Come in, I said quickly, sliding the envelope under a pillow. My mother Patricia slipped into the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. She wasn't wearing her usual mask of social perfection. Her face was drawn, her eyes tired, and for a moment she just looked like a woman who was carrying too much. But then she straightened her spine, and the hardness returned. We need to talk, she said, not sitting down but pacing the small space between the dresser and the window. About the loan. Your father is very upset that you walked out last night. He thinks you are being stubborn. I think you are being cruel. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Mom, I cannot sign that loan. It is not about being stubborn, it is about being smart. Preston is not who he says he is. I tried to tell you. She cut me off with a sharp wave of her hand. I do not want to hear your jealousy, Aaliyah. This isn't about Preston. It is about Bianca. It is about this family's future. She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her expression intense. Look at your sister. Look at her skin. Look at her hair. She is beautiful. She is light. She is everything we hoped for. She can go places we can't. She can marry into a family like the Vanderhovens, and no one will question her place at the table. She is our ticket out of mediocrity. Bianca is the only hope we have to scrub this family clean to make us acceptable. And you want to ruin that because of what? Because you are bitter. I stared at her, the breath knocked out of me by her naked prejudice. Scrub us clean, I repeated, my voice hollow. Is that what you think we are? Dirty. Because we are black. Because I am dark. Patricia didn't flinch. She stepped closer, looming over me. Don't play the victim. You know how the world works. Dark-skinned girls like you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Bianca was born with a head start. It is our duty as her family to push her across the finish line. You have to sacrifice. It is the only way. Don't be selfish, Aaliyah. For once in your life, think about the greater good. She reached out and touched my cheek, her fingers cold. I never said this to you before, but I am going to say it now. Every time I look at you, I see your grandmother, my mother-in-law. That woman was poor, she was uneducated, and she was black as coal. She worked herself to death in a kitchen and had nothing to show for it. You look just like her, and I hate it. I hate that you remind me of where we came from. I hate that you are the part of this family that holds us back. Bianca is the future. You are the past. So sign the paper. Pay for the wedding. Let your sister shine so she can lift us all up. Do it for the family name. Do it because you owe us for being the disappointment. Her words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. She had finally said the quiet part out loud. She didn't just favor Bianca. She resented my very existence because my skin color was a reminder of a heritage she despised. She wanted me to pay for my own erasure. I looked at her, at the mother who saw her child as a stain, and I felt a cold detachment settle over me. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. I stood up, meeting her gaze. "Get out of my room," I said softly. "And don't ever touch me again." I walked out of the guest bedroom, leaving my mother stunned by my dismissal. I marched straight back into the dining room where Desmond, Preston, and Bianca were waiting. They looked up, their eyes greedy, expecting to see the signed loan application in my hand. Instead, I picked up the blue velvet folder from the table. "Is it done?" Preston asked, extending his hand. "Did you sign it?" I looked at him, then at my father. I looked at the paper that would shackle me to their debts. I took the document out of the folder. I held it up so they could all see it clearly. Then I ripped it down the middle. The sound was loud in the silent room. I put the pieces together and ripped them again and again until the $300,000 loan was nothing but confetti. I let the pieces flutter down onto the remains of the roast lamb. "No," I said, my voice ice cold. "I will not sign. I will not pay for your fantasy. And I will not be your bank account. You are on your own." The silence broke with a roar. Desmond shot up from his chair, his face twisting into a mask of pure violence. "How dare you!" he screamed, knocking his wineglass over. The red liquid stained the white tablecloth like blood. "You insolent little brat! You think you can come into my house and disrespect us? You think you can say no to me?" He rounded the table, charging at me with his hand raised, ready to strike. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I just watched him come. Before his hand could make contact, the side door crashed open. A massive figure stepped into the room, moving faster than a man of his size should be able to. A hand like a vice clamp caught Desmond's wrist in midair, stopping the slap inches from my face. My father gasped in pain and shock, looking up into the stone face of Tyrell, my head of personal security. Tyrell was 6'5" and built like a tank. He had been waiting just outside the service entrance, listening via the open line on my phone. "I would not do that," Sir Tyrell said, his voice low and calm, but vibrating with threat. "Step away from Ms. Vance." Desmond tried to pull his arm free, but he couldn't move. "Who the hell are you?" he sputtered, looking from Tyrell to me. "Who is this man?" "He is the person who makes sure you don't touch me," I said simply. "Tyrell, release him." Tyrell let go and pushed my father back gently but firmly. Desmond stumbled into his chair, rubbing his wrist, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. I turned to leave. My mother was standing in the doorway now, clutching her throat. Preston and Bianca were frozen in their seats, staring at Tyrell. I walked to the door, my head high. "You are making a mistake," Desmond screamed after me, his courage returning as I walked away. "You will regret this, Aaliyah. You will regret not helping your sister. When we are celebrating at the Onyx Club, you will be nothing. You will wish you had signed." I didn't look back. I just walked out into the cool night air, leaving them with their debt and their rage. They thought this was the end. They had no idea I was just getting started. The glass doors of Vance Capitol Tower slid open with a whisper, and Bianca strutted into the lobby like she owned the place. She was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and carrying a stack of ivory envelopes. I watched her from the security feed in my office on the 45th floor. She walked right past the reception desk, ignoring the security protocols, and headed straight for the elevators. When the guard stopped her, she waved a hand dismissively. "I am here to see Aaliyah," she announced loudly. "She works here. Tell her sister is here and I don't have all day." I told my assistant to let her up, but to bring her to the small conference room on the 10th floor, the one we used for interns and temporary staff. I didn't want her anywhere near my executive suite. When I walked into the room 10 minutes later, Bianca was sitting on the edge of the table, scrolling through her phone, looking bored. She glanced up as I entered, taking in my simple black dress and lack of jewelry. "Still dressing like a librarian, I see," she sneered, slipping her phone into her purse. "I honestly don't know how you work in a building like this without feeling embarrassed. You must be the janitor's assistant or something." I didn't correct her. I just leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "What do you want, Bianca?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "I am busy," Bianca scoffed, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "Busy doing what? Filing papers, fetching coffee for the real bosses. Don't act important, Aaliyah. It doesn't suit you." She reached into her bag and pulled out a heavy cream-colored envelope sealed with gold wax. She tossed it onto the table between us. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding across the polished wood until it stopped right in front of me. There she said, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Your invitation. But don't get excited. It is not what you think." I picked up the envelope, breaking the seal. Inside was an invitation to her wedding at the Onyx Club. But there was a handwritten note clipped to the front. "Staff entrance only. Report to kitchen at 4 p.m. Uniform required: black pants, white shirt." I looked up at her, my expression unreadable. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the note. Bianca laughed, a cruel, tittering sound. "Preston and I talked about it," she explained, examining her fingernails. "We can't have you sitting with the guests, obviously. You would stick out like a sore thumb. Plus, we need extra hands. The catering staff is short a few servers, so we figured you could make yourself useful for once. You will be serving drinks and clearing tables. Preston says you have the perfect look for it. You know, unobtrusive, plain, suitable for carrying trays." She stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Consider it your contribution, since you were too selfish to sign the loan. This way you can work off your debt to the family. And don't even think about saying no. If you don't show up, Mom said she will come down here and make a scene at your little job. She will tell your boss what a horrible daughter you are. You don't want to lose this filing gig, do you?" I looked at the invitation, then at my sister. She honestly believed this was my place in the world, to serve her, to be beneath her. I felt a cold calm settle over me. I wasn't angry. I was ready. I looked her in the eye and smiled a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Okay, Bianca," I said, my voice soft. "I will be there. I will serve you exactly what you deserve." Bianca clapped her hands, delighted by her victory. "Good. Just make sure your shirt is clean. We don't want you looking like trash in the wedding photos. Don't embarrass me, Aaliyah. Just do your job and stay out of the way." She turned and flounced out of the room, leaving me with the invitation burning in my hand. She had no idea she had just handed me the weapon I would use to destroy her. The heavy oak door of the conference room clicked shut behind Bianca, leaving a silence that felt electric. I stood there for a moment, staring at the invitation in my hand. "Staff entrance only." The words were written in elegant calligraphy, a cruel joke wrapped in beauty. My sister wanted me to serve champagne to the people who had spent my entire life telling me I wasn't good enough. She wanted me to wear a uniform and fade into the background while she played the princess. She thought she was humiliating me. She thought she was putting me in my place. But what she didn't know was that she had just invited the executioner to her own wedding. I walked back to my office, the invitation clutched tight in my hand. My assistant Sarah looked up as I passed her desk, her eyes wide with curiosity, but she knew better than to ask. I closed my office door and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city skyline. From up here, everything looked small, manageable. My father's house, my mother's cruelty, my sister's vanity. It all felt insignificant against the scale of what I had built. But it wasn't insignificant. It was a cancer that had been eating away at me for years, and it was time to cut it out. I picked up the phone on my desk and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Yes, Ms. Vance." It was my head of legal counsel, a man named Thomas, who had been with me since I bought my first building. "Thomas," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I need you to prepare 2 files. I want them ready by tomorrow morning." "Go ahead," Thomas said, the sound of typing already audible in the background. "First, I want the complete dossier on the purchase of the debt held against Desmond Vance's estate. The mortgage, the business loans, the personal lines of credit. Everything. Make sure the transfer of ownership is finalized and notarized. I want the deed in my name before the weekend. Done." Thomas replied, his voice devoid of surprise. "And the second file?" "The second file is on Preston Vander Hoven. I want everything the private investigator found. The bankruptcy filings, the fraud charges, the restraining orders from his parents. I want the police reports from Atlantic City and the demand letters from the loan sharks. Compile it all into a single document. Make copies. Lots of copies." "Understood," Thomas said. "Is there anything else?" "Yes." I added, a small, cold smile touching my lips. "Call the catering company for the Onyx Club. Tell them I will be personally overseeing the service at the Vanderhoven wedding this weekend. Tell them to have a uniform ready for me. But make sure they know who is asking. I don't want any confusion when I show up." Thomas paused for a second, the only crack in his professional armor. "You are going to serve the wedding yourself, Ms. Vance?" "Yes, Thomas," I said, looking down at the city below. "I am. My sister wants me to bring her drinks, but I think I will bring her something else instead. I am going to serve her the truth, and I am going to serve it cold." "Very good," Ms. Vance, Thomas said. "The files will be on your desk at 8 a.m. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my office. I looked at the invitation again. Staff entrance only. I would use the staff entrance all right. But when I walked out, I would own the building. I would own the debt. And I would own them. Bianca wanted a servant. She was about to get a queen. The polished granite floors of First National Bank echoed with the sound of my heels as I walked toward the executive offices. I wasn't wearing my usual athleisure wear today. I was dressed for a takeover in a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than my father's car. The bank manager, Mr. Henderson, was waiting for me at the door of his office, his face a mask of professional courtesy, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. It wasn't every day someone walked in to buy a distressed debt portfolio, especially one that belonged to their own family. "Ms. Vance, please come in," Mr. Henderson said, ushering me into his office. "We have the paperwork ready as you requested." I sat down in the leather chair, crossing my legs. "Let's get to it," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "I want to verify the details before I sign. The mortgage on the estate in Buckhead, the business loans for Vance Enterprises, and the personal lines of credit. It is all here." Mr. Henderson slid a stack of documents across the desk. "It is all here, Ms. Vance. Your father has been in default for 6 months. The bank was preparing to initiate foreclosure proceedings next week." He paused, looking at me over his glasses. "You understand that by purchasing this debt, you become the lien holder. You will have all the rights and responsibilities of the creditor. You can foreclose. You can seize assets. You can evict." I picked up the pen, feeling the weight of it in my hand. "I understand perfectly," I said. "That is exactly why I am doing it." I opened the checkbook I had brought with me. It was a business account from my private equity firm, the Onyx Group. I wrote out the check for $2 million. The pen scratched across the paper a sound that felt louder than a scream. $2 million to own my father. $2 million to own the roof over my mother's head. $2 million to hold the fate of my family in the palm of my hand. I handed the check to Mr. Henderson. He looked at the amount, then at me. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't say a word. He just took the check and stamped the documents. Paid in full, transferred. The words were stamped in red ink, bold and final. "Here is the transfer of deed," Mr. Henderson said, handing me a thick folder. "Congratulations, Ms. Vance. You are now the primary creditor for the Vance estate. The bank is out of it. It is all yours." I took the folder, feeling a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was power. Pure, unadulterated power. For 10 years, my father had held money over my head like a weapon. He had used it to control me, to shame me, to cast me out. Now I held the weapon, and I knew exactly how to use it. I stood up, smoothing my suit jacket. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said, shaking his hand. "Please make sure the foreclosure notice is prepared. I will be serving it personally." He looked startled. "Personally, Ms. Vance? Usually we send a process server." "This is a family matter," I replied, my voice devoid of warmth. "I want to make sure they get the message." I walked out of the bank, the folder tucked under my arm. The sun was shining, but all I could feel was the cold weight of the debt I now owned. My father thought he was the king of his castle. He thought he was untouchable. He didn't know that the castle was built on sand, and I had just bought the sand. I got into my car and placed the folder on the passenger seat next to the invitation for Bianca's wedding. They fit together perfectly. The invitation to serve and the power to destroy. I started the engine. It was time to go to work. The ballroom of the Onyx Club had been transformed into a spectacle of excess that would make Versailles look modest. Bianca had demanded thousands of white hydrangeas imported from Holland, draping every surface from the vaulted ceilings to the backs of the gold Chiavari chairs. A 12-piece orchestra played soft classical music on a raised platform, while servers circulated with trays of caviar and truffle-infused hors d'oeuvres. The guest list was a who's who of the East Coast elite. There were tech moguls from Silicon Alley, senators from D.C., and the old money families from Martha's Vineyard, who usually looked down on new wealth, but had shown up to witness the union of the Vance and van der Hoeven dynasties. I watched it all from the periphery, dressed in the crisp black and white uniform of the service staff. My hair was tucked under a cap, and I kept my head low, blending in with the other waiters, who were rushing to keep champagne glasses filled. From my vantage point near the raw bar, I had a perfect view of my parents holding court in the center of the room. Desmond looked like a peacock in his custom tuxedo, his chest puffed out as he spoke to a group of influential investors. He swirled his scotch with the casual arrogance of a man who believed his own lies. I overheard him speaking to Judge Williams, a man known for his strict adherence to the law. "Oh yes, we have been silent partners in the Onyx Group for years." Desmond lied smoothly, his voice carrying just enough to impress the surrounding circle. "We prefer to keep our ownership stake quiet, of course. We let the management handle the day-to-day operations, but we have a significant voice in the board decisions. That is why we could secure the venue on such short notice. It pays to be on the inside." Patricia was no better. She stood by the chocolate fountain, clutching the arm of Preston's mother, a woman who looked as if she was smelling something unpleasant, but was too polite to say so. Patricia was beaming, pointing at the expensive details of the decor, as if she had paid for them herself. "We wanted to give Bianca the world," Patricia gushed. "Money is no object when it comes to family tradition. We are just so happy to merge our assets with yours. It is a union of equals, really. Two powerhouses coming together." I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. They were not just lying, they were building a monument to their own delusion. They were telling people they owned the very club that had banned them, the very club I owned. They were leveraging my property to buy credibility with people who would despise them if they knew the truth. They were standing on a trapdoor I had built, and they were jumping up and down on it, begging for it to open. Preston stood nearby laughing with his fraternity brothers, looking every inch the wealthy groom. He didn't look like a man who owed money to loan sharks. He looked like a prince. But I knew the truth. The castle was made of cards and the wind was picking up. The bridal suite was a sanctuary of ivory, silk, and nervous energy. Bianca sat in front of a vanity mirror surrounded by a team of frantic makeup artists and stylists. She was screaming at a young woman who was trying to apply false eyelashes. "You are incompetent," Bianca shrieked, slapping the woman's hand away. "Do you know who I am? Who? Do you know how much this wedding costs? If you mess up my eyes, I will sue you for everything you have. Get out. Get out now." The stylist fled in tears, leaving Bianca fuming at her own reflection. I slipped into the room carrying a silver tray with a single glass of water. I was still wearing the server's uniform, the black pants and white shirt that made me invisible to people like my sister. But I had not yet put on the apron. Bianca spotted me in the mirror, and her expression shifted from rage to malicious delight. "Well, look who decided to show up," she sneered, turning in her chair to face me. "You actually put on the uniform. I am impressed. I didn't think you had the humility. But then again, you always were good at being in the background." She looked down at her feet encased in white satin heels encrusted with crystals. "These shoes cost $5,000, she announced, lifting one foot slightly. "And look, there is a smudge on the toe, probably from walking through this dusty hallway." She pointed a manicured finger at the floor. "Clean it." I stood still holding the tray. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice calm. "You heard me," Bianca snapped. "Get down on your knees and clean my shoe. You are the help today, remember. That is what help does. Unless you want me to call Preston and tell him you are refusing to work. I am sure he would love to throw you out before the ceremony even starts." I looked at her, at the petty tyrant she had become. She wasn't just spoiled, she was broken. She needed to demean me to feel tall. I set the tray down on a side table. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered myself to one knee. Bianca let out a laugh of pure triumph. "That is right," she crowed. "Down on the floor. That is your position, Aaliyah, beneath me, where you have always belonged." I took the hem of my apron and gently wiped the toe of her shoe. I didn't look up at her. I looked at the crystal buckle shining in the light. It was fake, just like everything else about this day. I could see the glue holding the stones in place. I finished wiping the shoe and stood up, dusting off my knee. "Is that better?" I asked, a small, unreadable smile playing on my lips. Bianca inspected her shoe with a critical eye. "It will do," she sniffed. "Now get out. Go find something to carry. And don't let me see you until the reception. I don't want your bad energy ruining my walk down the aisle." I picked up the tray and walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. "You look beautiful, Bianca," I said softly. "Enjoy your moment. It is going to be unforgettable." Bianca didn't even look at me. She was already back to admiring herself in the mirror. She didn't see the smile on my face as I closed the door. It wasn't a smile of submission. It was the smile of the wolf before it eats the sheep. The ceremony was held in the grand atrium, a soaring space with a glass ceiling that let in the soft evening light. The 12-piece orchestra struck up the opening chords of the bridal march, and the heavy double doors swung open. Desmond walked in first, his chest puffed out like a rooster leading his prize hen. Bianca clung to his arm, her face radiant with practiced joy, her eyes scanning the crowd for cameras. She looked every inch the fairy tale princess she had always demanded to be. Preston stood at the altar looking handsome and bored. He adjusted his cufflinks and leaned over to his best man, a fraternity brother named Chaz, who looked equally hungover. The lapel microphone clipped to Preston's tuxedo jacket was supposed to be muted until the vows, but thanks to a small adjustment by the sound engineer I had hired, it was live. It wasn't broadcasting to the main speakers yet, just a low hum that was picked up by the monitors near the front row, where the most important guests were seated. I stood in the shadows near the soundboard watching the levels on the mixer. The engineer nodded at me, his hand hovering over the fader. I gave him a subtle signal. He pushed the slider up just a fraction. Preston leaned closer to Chaz, a smirk twisting his lips. "Look at them," he whispered, his voice low but audible to the front row. "They think they have made it. Poor bastards. As soon as that ring is on her finger, I am getting access to the old man's accounts. I will pay off the Italians by Monday and buy myself a new Porsche by Tuesday." Chaz chuckled, keeping his eyes on the approaching bride. "What about her?" he asked, nodding toward Bianca. Preston scoffed. "Please, I give it a year. Once the money is secure, I will file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. She is too stupid to notice anyway. She just wants the last name. I will leave her with the debt and take the house. It is almost too easy." A ripple of confusion went through the front row. Preston's mother frowned, leaning forward as if trying to decipher a strange noise. Judge Williams tilted his head, his expression sharpening. They had heard something, but they couldn't quite place it. Was it the groom speaking? Was it a recording? The doubt was planted. The seed of destruction had been sown. Bianca reached the altar, her face glowing with triumph. She didn't hear the whispers. She didn't see the confused looks. She only saw the man who was her ticket to legitimacy. Desmond handed her over to Preston, beaming with pride. He shook Preston's hand, welcoming the wolf into the fold. Preston smiled back, the picture of a loving groom. But the microphone was still live, and the real show was about to begin. I signaled the engineer again. Full volume. It was time for the main event. The priest, a man with kind eyes and a voice made for Sundays, cleared his throat. He looked out over the sea of faces, the expensive flowers, and the expectant couple. He took a breath, preparing to deliver the line that everyone knew was just a formality. "If anyone here knows of any just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence that followed was thick with anticipation. Usually this was the moment for a collective breath, a rustle of fabric as people shifted in their seats ready for the vows. But today the silence was broken by the sharp click of heels on marble. Not the hurried steps of a late guest, but the deliberate, confident stride of someone who owned the room. I stepped out from the shadows of the alcove near the altar. I was no longer wearing the black pants and white shirt of the help. I had shed that skin in the server's closet moments before. Now I was wearing a gown that looked like it had been woven from starlight. It was a custom haute couture piece, a shimmering cascade of silver and midnight blue silk that hugged every curve and trailed behind me like a comet's tail. Around my neck hung a necklace of flawless white diamonds, each stone larger than the engagement ring on Bianca's finger. The matching earrings caught the light, sending prisms of color dancing across the walls. The gasps from the audience were audible. Heads turned, necks craned. Bianca's mouth fell open, her eyes wide with shock and jealousy. Desmond looked as if he were seeing a ghost. Preston froze, his arrogant smirk vanishing instantly. I stopped at the foot of the altar, my gaze fixed on the groom. "I do," I said, my voice clear and unwavering, ringing through the hall without the need for a microphone. "I object." The priest looked stunned, his prayer book lowering slowly. "On what grounds?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. I took a step closer, my eyes never leaving Preston's face. "On the grounds of fraud," I declared. "Because this wedding is built on a lie. And because the groom standing here in his rented tuxedo does not have the money to pay for the ring on the bride's finger. In fact, he doesn't have the money to pay for his own shoes." A murmur ran through the crowd like a wave. People were whispering, pointing, pulling out their phones. Preston's face turned a mottled red, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "Who let her in?" he hissed, looking around for security. "Get her out of here. She is crazy. She is ruining everything." I smiled, a cold, hard expression that promised no mercy. "I didn't need to be let in, Preston," I said. "I own the keys. And I am not ruining anything. I am saving everyone here from a very expensive mistake." Preston's face twisted into a mask of pure fury as the shock of my interruption wore off. He grabbed the microphone stand and hurled it aside, the metal clattering loudly against the marble steps. "Who is this crazy woman?" he screamed, his voice cracking under the strain of his own entitlement. "Where is security? I pay good money for protection from the riffraff. Get her out of here. Someone get these doors open and drag this psychotic stalker into the street." He looked wild, his eyes darting around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to validate his authority. My father Desmond scrambled up from the front pew, his face a mirror of Preston's rage. "You heard him?" he bellowed, waving his arms at the back of the room. "Security! Do your jobs! This woman is mentally unstable. She is dangerous. Remove her immediately." Patricia stood up beside him, clutching her chest, looking at the wealthy guests, with apologetic eyes, trying desperately to salvage the social standing she saw crumbling before her. "I am so sorry, everyone," she cried out, her voice shrill. "Please ignore her. She is off her medication. We will handle this." The double doors at the back of the atrium swung open with force. A squad of 8 security officers marched in. They were not the regular club security. These men wore tactical suits and earpieces, moving with the synchronized precision of a military unit. They stormed down the center aisle, their boots thudding rhythmically against the floor. Preston let out a breath of relief, a smug grin returning to his face. Finally, he sneered, looking at me with triumph. "You are done, Aaliyah. You wanted a show, well, now you are going to get one. I hope you enjoy the view from the pavement." He stepped back, gesturing grandly toward me as the guards approached the altar. "Take her away, boys, and do not be gentle. She likes to play rough." The guests leaned forward, eager for the climax of the drama. Bianca smirked, crossing her arms, waiting to see me dragged away in my expensive gown. The guards ascended the stairs, their faces stone. They moved fast, closing the distance in seconds. Preston pointed a finger right in my face. "Get her," he ordered. But the hands that reached out did not grab me. The guards moved past me in a blur of motion. They stepped between me and Preston. They stepped between me and my father. In one fluid movement, they turned their backs to me and locked ranks. They formed an impenetrable human wall of black suits and muscle facing outward toward the groom and his guests. Preston froze, his finger still pointing at nothing. He blinked, confusion warring with anger. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice wavering. "I said get her. You are facing the wrong way. Turn around and do your job." The captain of the detail, a man named Henderson, who had been my head of security for 3 years, stepped forward. He towered over Preston, forcing the groom to look up. Henderson did not blink. He did not smile. He looked at Preston with the cold indifference of a hammer looking at a nail. "I am afraid you are mistaken, Mr. van der Hoven." Henderson said, his voice deep and resonant, projecting clearly to every corner of the silent room. "We are doing our job. We do not take orders from guests with suspended memberships. And we certainly do not take orders from you." Preston sputtered, his face flushing a deep crimson. "I am the groom. My family founded this town. I demand you remove this woman. She is trespassing." Henderson shook his head slowly. "No, sir. You are the one trespassing. We work for Chairman Aaliyah Vance. She owns this building. She pays our salaries, and she has instructed us to ensure that no one interrupts her presentation. So, unless you want to be physically removed from your own wedding, I suggest you step back and listen." The giant LED screen behind the altar, which had been displaying a slideshow of Bianca and Preston's staged engagement photos, suddenly flickered. The romantic music cut out with a sharp screech of feedback that made everyone wince. The screen went black for a heartbeat before a new image blazed into existence. It wasn't a photo of the happy couple. It was a high-resolution scan of a legal document, the deed to the Onyx Club. The text was crisp and undeniable. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Property deed, the Onyx Club and Resort." And right below that, in the line designated for the owner, was my name, Aaliyah Vance. Not Desmond, not a silent partner group. Me. A gasp rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. People squinted, trying to process what they were seeing. My father stared at the screen, his face draining of color until he looked like a statue made of ash. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. My mother clutched her chest, her eyes darting frantically between the screen and the confused guests. I stepped out from behind the wall of security guards. I didn't need them to protect me anymore. The truth was my shield. I walked to the center of the altar, standing directly beneath the glowing evidence of my ownership. I picked up the microphone Preston had discarded. "You have been lied to," I said, my voice calm, but carrying a weight that silenced the room instantly. "My parents, Desmond and Patricia Vance, do not own this club. They do not own a single brick of this building. They are not silent partners. They are delinquent members who owe $50,000 in unpaid dues." The crowd erupted into whispers. I saw Preston's mother turn to my mother, her expression one of pure horror. Patricia tried to speak to explain, but the words died in her throat. I continued, my voice cutting through the noise. "I own this club. I bought it 2 years ago when it was facing bankruptcy. I rebuilt it. I made it what it is today, and I did it without a single dime from the people who claim to run this town." I turned to look at my father. He was trembling now, his facade of power crumbling before his eyes. "You told everyone you secured this venue because of your influence, Dad," I said. "You told them you pulled strings. But the truth is, you booked it because I let you. I approved the reservation because I wanted to see how far you would go. I wanted to see if you would tell the truth. But you didn't. You lied. You lied to your friends. You lied to your future in-laws. And you lied to me." I looked out at the guests, at the expensive flowers, at the untouched food. "And there is one more thing," I added. "This party, this lavish celebration of excess, it hasn't been paid for. The deposit check bounced this morning. My finance department flagged it an hour ago. So as the owner of this establishment, I am exercising my right to refuse service." I looked directly at Preston, who was now sweating profusely. "This party is over. The kitchen is closed, the bar is shut down, and security will be escorting everyone off the premises in 15 minutes. I suggest you start walking, unless you want to pay the bill right now. In cash." The room exploded into chaos. Guests stood up shouting questions. Waiters stopped serving looking confused. Bianca let out a scream of pure rage. But I didn't flinch. I just stood there beneath the proof of my power, watching my family's lies burn down around them. Desmond roared, a sound of pure animalistic rage that tore through the stunned silence of the ballroom. He scrambled up the marble steps, his face contorted into a mask of violence, his hands reaching out to strangle the truth before it could destroy him further. He lunged for the microphone, his expensive tuxedo straining against his heaving chest. "You liar!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Turn it off! Turn it all off! You are ruining everything!" My security detail moved to intercept him, but I held up a hand. "Let him come," I said, my voice amplified by the sound system, calm and cold as ice. "Let him see exactly what he has done." Desmond froze inches from me, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. He looked at the guards who were ready to drop him, then he looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes, real primal fear. I clicked the remote in my hand. The screen behind me changed again. Gone was the deed to the club. In its place was a document that looked far more sinister. It was a transfer of lien, a complex financial instrument that boiled down to one simple fact: the mortgage on the Vance family estate in Buckhead, the business loans that kept his company afloat, the personal lines of credit he used to fund his lavish lifestyle. They had all been bundled together and sold to me. Desmond stared at the screen, his mouth working silently. He recognized the account numbers. He recognized the addresses. He recognized his own signature at the bottom of the original loan documents. But the name at the top, the name of the lien holder, was new. The Onyx Group. "You recognize this, don't you, Dad?" I asked, my voice cutting through his confusion like a scalpel. "You haven't paid your mortgage in 6 months. You haven't serviced your business loans in a year. You have been living on borrowed time and borrowed money, and the bank was getting ready to take it all. They were going to kick you out on the street next week." I took a step closer to him until I was whispering directly into his ear, though the microphone caught every word. But I saved them the trouble. I bought your debt, Dad. Every single cent of it. I own your mortgage. I own your business loans. I own the shirt on your back and the shoes on your feet. I pulled back, looking him in the eye. And since you have violated the terms of your repayment agreement by failing to disclose your financial insolvency, I am calling in the loan. Right now. Effective immediately. Desmond staggered back as if I had hit him. You can't do that, he gasped, clutching his chest. That is my house. I built that house. It is not your house, I corrected him, my voice ringing with finality. It is my house, and I am initiating foreclosure proceedings as of this moment. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. After that, the locks will be changed and your belongings will be placed on the curb, just like you threw my suitcase in the mud 10 years ago. You wanted to play the big man Desmond. You wanted to pretend you were a king. Well, the king is dead, and the landlord is here to collect rent. The ballroom was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. Guests stared with their mouths open, unable to look away from the train wreck of the Vance dynasty. Patricia let out a low moan and collapsed into a chair, fanning herself frantically. Bianca looked from me to her father, her eyes wide with dawning horror, as she realized her safety net had just been set on fire. I looked at my father, a broken man standing in a borrowed tuxedo in a room he couldn't afford. Do you want to see what else I bought? I asked softly, clicking the remote one more time. Or have you had enough? Because I am just getting started. Preston looked like a cornered rat. His eyes darted toward the exit, his body tensing as if he were about to sprint. He took a step backward, his hand reaching for Bianca's arm, not to comfort her, but to use her as a shield or perhaps a hostage. I am leaving, he announced, his voice shrill and panicked. This is insane. I am not listening to any more of this garbage. Come on, Bianca. We are getting out of here. Not so fast, Preston, I said, my voice stopping him in his tracks. You haven't seen the best part yet. I clicked the remote. The screen flickered again, replacing the foreclosure notice with a mugshot. It was Preston, 5 years younger, looking disheveled and angry, holding a slate with a booking number. Below the photo was a list of charges that read like a criminal resume. The crowd gasped again, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. I pointed at the screen. Meet the real Preston Vanderhoven, I announced. Or should I say, Preston Miller, because that is the name on his birth certificate. He legally changed it 5 years ago after his first stint in prison for fraud. Preston turned pale, his hand dropping from Bianca's arm. That is a lie, he shouted, though his voice lacked conviction. That is Photoshop. You are framing me. I ignored him, addressing the crowd directly. He has 2 prior convictions for wire fraud and embezzlement. He filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 3 years ago, listing assets of zero and debts of over $500,000. And the prestigious Vanderhoven family. He isn't heir to anything. His parents disowned him 5 years ago after he stole his grandmother's jewelry to pay off gambling debts. They have a restraining order against him. He isn't allowed within 500 feet of their estate. Bianca stared at the screen, her face a mask of horror. She looked at Preston, then back at the mugshot. But the trust fund, she whispered. The international bonds. There is no trust fund, Bianca. I said, my voice softening slightly, but only slightly. There are no bonds. He is broke. He has been using Mom and Dad to pay off his loan sharks. That $300,000 loan they wanted me to sign. It wasn't for the wedding. It was for the interest on his gambling debts. He was going to take the money and run, leaving you with the bill. I clicked the remote one last time. A new document appeared, an active arrest warrant from the state of Florida. He is currently wanted for defrauding a 70-year-old widow out of her life savings in a romance scam, I revealed. He promised to marry her too, right before he emptied her bank accounts and disappeared. Bianca, you aren't marrying a prince. You are marrying a predator. You are marrying a criminal who is so broke he can't even afford his own lies. Preston looked around the room, realizing the game was up. The guests were looking at him with disgust, not admiration. His wealthy friends were backing away, checking their own wallets. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You think you are so smart?" he snarled. "You think you have won. But you don't know who you are dealing with. I have friends in low places." I laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the silent hall. "And I have friends in the FBI, Preston, and they are waiting outside right now. So by all means run. It will just add resisting arrest to your list of charges." The ballroom erupted into chaos. It wasn't the joyful chaos of a celebration, but the panicked, frenzied chaos of a disaster unfolding in real time. Guests were standing on their chairs, craning their necks to get a better view of the screens which now displayed Preston's criminal record in high definition. Phones were out everywhere, recording the downfall of the Vance-Vanderhoeven alliance. I watched from the altar as the facade crumbled, but the final nail in the coffin came from an unexpected direction. In the front row reserved for the groom's family, an older couple had been sitting quietly throughout the ceremony. They were dressed impeccably, looking every bit the part of old money patriarchs. But as the accusations flew and the police sirens began to wail in the distance, their composure cracked. The man stood up, adjusting his tie nervously. He looked at Preston, who was still trying to stare me down, and then he looked at the angry crowd. He cleared his throat, but in the silence it sounded like a shout. "Hey, kid," he called out, his voice rough and uncultured, completely at odds with his tuxedo. "This wasn't part of the deal. You said this was a simple gig. Smile, wave, look rich. You didn't say anything about the FBI or mobs." Preston whirled around, his face draining of blood. "Shut up," he hissed through clenched teeth. "Sit down and shut up. I will handle this." But the woman stood up too, clutching her designer bag, which I now noticed still had a tag tucked discreetly inside. "No, we are not shutting up," she declared, her accent thick and undeniably working class. "I am an actor, not a criminal accomplice. You owe us $500 each for playing your parents today. And I want it now, in cash, before the cops get here." A collective gasp went through the room. Bianca stared at the couple, her eyes bulging. "Actors," she whispered. "You hired actors." "But I met them. We had dinner. They told me stories about your childhood." The woman snorted. "Honey, I read a script. He emailed it to me last week. I have never met this guy before Tuesday. He picked us up from a casting call for a detergent commercial. Said he needed distinguished-looking people for a private event. I thought it was a murder mystery party, not actual fraud." Desmond looked like he was having a stroke. He stumbled toward the couple, his hand clutching his chest. "You mean you aren't the Vanderhovens?" he wheezed. "But we discussed investment strategies. We talked about the yacht club." The man shrugged. "I watched a YouTube video on investing in the car on the way over. And I don't know a yacht from a canoe, buddy. I just repeated what the kid told me to say. Look, is anyone going to pay us, or should we start talking to the police when they get here? I bet they would love to know about the script." The guests were in an uproar. The prestigious Vanderhoeven family was a lie. The wealth was a lie. Even the parents were a lie. People were laughing now, cruel, hysterical laughter, as the absurdity of the situation sank in. The social climbers who had been so desperate to impress were realizing they had been kissing the ring of a pauper. I looked at Preston, who was now shaking with rage and fear. His house of cards hadn't just fallen, it had been incinerated, and the ashes were falling all around him. The illusion shattered completely, and Bianca shattered with it. For a moment, she just stood there amidst the ruins of her perfect day, vibrating with a frequency of rage that felt dangerous. Then she snapped. The sound that ripped from her throat was a primal shriek of humiliation, a sound so raw it made the guests flinch. She grabbed the delicate lace of her bodice, the dress that cost more than my first car, and tore at it with clawed hands. The fabric ripped with a sickening sound of destruction. She ripped the veil from her head, taking a chunk of hair with it, and threw it on the ground, stomping on it with her crystal heels. You monster, she screamed, her face streaked with black tears of mascara and despair. You liar. You ruined my life. She launched herself at Preston, her fingernails aiming for his eyes. She was a whirlwind of white silk and fury, striking him, slapping him, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. She pummeled his chest, sobbing hysterically, asking him how he could do this to her, how he could humiliate her in front of the entire city. Preston took the blows for a second, too shocked to react, but then his own anger boiled over. He grabbed Bianca by the shoulders and shoved her hard. She stumbled backward, her heels catching on the torn layers of her dress, and she fell heavily onto the cold marble floor. The crowd gasped, but no one moved to help her. "Get off me, you psycho!" Preston spat, straightening his jacket with a sneer. "You act like you are the victim here. Please, look at yourself. You are pathetic. You thought you were some prize catch, didn't you? You thought I was lucky to have you." He laughed, a harsh, cruel bark that echoed off the high ceilings. "I never loved you, Bianca. I could barely stand to look at you. You are shallow, you are vain, and you are dumb as a box of rocks. The only reason I looked twice at you was because of the name. I thought your family had money. I thought your father was a big shot. And when I realized he was a fraud, I stuck around because I saw her." He pointed a shaking finger at me, standing calm and untouched on the altar. "I saw your sister. I saw the real money. I figured if I married into the family, I could get my hands on her assets. I could guilt her into paying my debts. That is the only reason I walked down this aisle." He looked down at Bianca, who was weeping on the floor, a crumpled heap of broken dreams. "You and your parents are nothing but bougie wannabes," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You play dress up. You rent expensive cars. You act like royalty, but you are rot. You are empty. If your sister wasn't rich, I wouldn't have even spit in your direction. So don't cry to me about love. We were both using each other. I just got caught first." Bianca looked up at him, her eyes hollow. She looked at her parents, who were cowering in shame, and then she looked at me. For the first time, she saw the truth. She wasn't the princess. She was just the bait in a trap she helped build. And now she was left with nothing but a torn dress and a heart full of glass. The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the grand atrium burst open with a force that rattled the crystal chandeliers. This time, it was not a hired security team or a catering crew. 6 agents wearing navy blue windbreakers with bright yellow letters emblazoned on the back stormed into the room. "Federal agents, everyone stay where you are," a commanding voice boomed over the murmurs of the crowd. The guests froze instinctively, stepping back to create a wide path down the center aisle. The agents moved with practiced efficiency, ignoring the stunned onlookers, and heading straight for the altar where the remains of the Vance dynasty lay scattered. Preston saw them coming, and for a split second I thought he might try to run again. He looked toward the side exit but saw my security team blocking the way with crossed arms. He looked at the stained glass windows, but they were too high. He was trapped in the cage of his own making. 2 agents ascended the marble steps and grabbed him by the arms. He began to struggle, kicking and thrashing like a child throwing a tantrum. "Get your hands off me!" he shrieked, his voice cracking with panic. "Do you know who I am? This is a mistake. I am a victim here. You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, identity theft, and interstate racketeering," the lead agent stated calmly, pulling Preston's arms behind his back. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and final, cutting through the air like a gunshot. It was the sound of justice finally catching up. Preston's face turned a violent shade of purple. He stopped struggling against the metal cuffs and turned his venom toward the only other target within range. "It was him," he screamed, thrusting his chin toward my father. "It was Desmond Vance. He is the mastermind. He lured me into this. He told me he was a billionaire. He told me he owned this club. He showed me fake financial records. I only did what I did because he promised me a payout." Desmond, who had been trying to slink away into the shadows, stopped dead in his tracks. He spun around, his face a mask of indignation. "You lying snake!" Desmond roared, pointing a trembling finger at the man who was supposed to be his son-in-law. I never showed you anything. You came into my house. You ate my food. You drank my wine. You told me you had a trust fund worth $50 million. You said you were going to invest in my company. You are the con artist, not me. Preston laughed, a manic, desperate sound that made the guests shudder. I was conning you because you were conning me, you old fool. I checked your credit score. I knew you were desperate. I just thought I could squeeze a few million out of your daughter before the house of cards fell. He looked at the agents, his eyes wild with betrayal. Arrest him too. He is an accomplice. He signed the loan applications. He knew everything. Patricia let out a wail, clutching her pearls, looking as though she might faint. Oh my God! Stop it! Stop it, both of you! She cried, her voice shrill. We are innocent. We didn't know he was a criminal. We were just trying to help our daughter. Preston spat on the floor near her feet. You were trying to sell your daughter to the highest bidder, you witch. You are just as bad as him. You are all bougie trash. The audience watched in morbid fascination as the family tore itself apart. There was no loyalty here, no love, no dignity, just a group of desperate, greedy people trying to push each other under the bus to save themselves. They were cannibals feasting on each other's failures. I stood silently to the side, watching the agents drag Preston away while he continued to scream accusations at my father. It was the perfect ending to their twisted fairy tale. The echoes of Preston's screaming accusations faded, leaving a heavy silence in the ballroom as the federal agents dragged him out the back doors. My father stood alone near the flower arch, his tuxedo disheveled and his dignity stripped away. He looked at the crowd, then at the empty spot where the groom had been, and finally at me. He saw the cold resolve in my eyes, and he knew he had no cards left to play. He knew he couldn't bully me anymore. He knew he couldn't lie his way out of this. So he did the only thing a desperate man with no honor could do. He played the victim. Desmond let out a strangled gasp, clutching his chest with both hands, his face contorted in a grimace that looked practiced rather than painful. He stumbled forward, his knees buckling theatrically until he collapsed onto the marble steps. My heart, he groaned loudly enough for the back row to hear. Someone help me. I am having a heart attack. It is too much. The stress is killing me. He writhed on the floor, one hand reaching out toward the guests, begging for sympathy. My mother, Patricia, didn't rush to her husband's side. Instead, she looked at me. She saw the deed on the screen behind me. She saw the security detail at my command. She realized in that moment that her survival didn't depend on Desmond anymore. It depended on the daughter she had despised for 10 years. She threw herself at my feet, her knees hitting the hard floor with a painful thud. She grabbed the hem of my couture gown, her tears now flowing freely, ruining her heavy makeup. Aaliyah, baby, please, she sobbed, looking up at me with mascara running down her cheeks. Look at what you are doing. You are killing your father. He is dying right in front of us. You have to stop this. You have to fix this. We are your family. You cannot just leave us like this. We have nothing. Please have mercy. We are old people, Aaliyah. Do not destroy us. I looked down at the woman clutching my dress. I looked at the man writhing on the floor, peeking through one open eye to see if anyone was rushing to help him. I searched inside myself for a spark of concern or a flicker of guilt. I searched for the little girl who just wanted her parents to love her, but she wasn't there. She had drowned in the rain 10 years ago when they threw her out. All that was left was the truth. Get up, Patricia, I said, my voice void of any warmth, and tell Desmond to stop acting. He is not having a heart attack. He is having a panic attack because he got caught. Patricia froze, her hands falling away from my dress. I stepped back, creating a distance between us that felt like miles. I leaned down slightly, addressing my father, who was still groaning on the floor. You can stop the performance, Dad, I said calmly. It won't work this time. I am not the naive girl who cried when you yelled. I am the woman who owns your debt. And I can see right through you. I straightened up, smoothing the silk of my gown. However, I am not a monster. I called an ambulance 10 minutes ago when the police arrived because I knew you would pull a stunt like this. They are waiting outside the service entrance. Paramedics are standing by to check your vitals. But let me be very clear about one thing. I looked at both of them, my expression unreadable. I will not be riding with you. I will not be visiting you. And I certainly will not be paying the hospital bill. You are on your own. Good luck. I turned my back on them. I turned my back on the weeping mother, the fake dying father, and the ruined sister. I heard them calling my name, screaming for me to come back, begging for money, but I didn't stop. I walked down the center aisle, my head held high toward the exit where the sun was setting on their world and rising on mine. I didn't look back once. The smell of strong antiseptic and stale coffee hung heavy in the air of the public ward. It was a far cry from the private suites with city views and concierge service that Desmond was used to. Here there were no private nurses or fluffy robes. Just a row of narrow beds separated by thin, flimsy curtains that did little to block out the sounds of coughing and moaning from the other patients. I walked down the linoleum aisle, my heels clicking softly, a stark contrast to the shuffling of the overworked nurses. I found my father in bed 4. He looked smaller without his tailored suit. His face was pale against the rough pillowcase, and the hospital gown hung loosely on his frame. He looked like exactly what he was, a bankrupt old man with nowhere else to go. He opened his eyes as I approached. For a second, I saw a flicker of the old arrogance, but it was quickly replaced by a look of calculated vulnerability. He shifted, trying to prop himself up on one elbow, his hand reaching out shakily toward me. "Aaliyah." He croaked, his voice rough from disuse. "You came, I knew you would." "I knew. You are a good girl deep down." I stood at the foot of the bed, keeping my hands firmly clasped around my purse. I did not take his hand. I did not sit in the plastic chair. I just watched him. He licked his dry lips and tried to smile. "I have been thinking, Aaliyah," he said, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. "About everything. About how hard I was on you growing up. You have to understand why I did it. I saw how brilliant you were. I saw that fire in you. But I knew the world would be cruel to a girl like you, so I had to be cruel first. I had to toughen you up. I had to push you to the breaking point so you would learn to fight back." He paused, waiting for me to nod to agree with his twisted logic. When I remained silent, he continued, gaining a little more confidence. "Look at you now. You are a billionaire. You own the city. You beat everyone, including me. Don't you see? It was my plan all along. I played the villain so you could become the hero. I did it for you, Aaliyah. I pushed you because I loved you enough to make you strong." I felt a bubble of laughter rise in my throat, but it was devoid of humor. It was a cold, sharp thing. I looked at this man who had thrown my suitcase in the mud, who had called me worthless, who had tried to sell my sister to a con artist, and I marveled at his delusion. "Stop it, Dad," I said, my voice quiet, but cutting through the noise of the ward like a knife. "Do not do that. Do not rewrite history to make yourself feel better. You are not a mentor. You are not a teacher. And you certainly are not a martyr who sacrificed his relationship with his daughter for her success." I took a step closer, gripping the metal rail of the bed. "You were hard on me because you didn't like me," I stated simply. "It is that simple. You hated that I looked like your mother, who was poor and black. You hated that I wouldn't bow down to you. You threw me out that night 10 years ago, not to build my character, but because I refused to marry a stranger to save your failing company. You didn't care if I survived or died in that storm. You just wanted me gone." Desmond's face fell, his mask slipping. "But Aaliyah," he stammered. "No," I interrupted. "You do not get to take credit for my empire. I built this in spite of you, not because of you. You were the anchor dragging me down, not the wind in my sails. So do not lie to me now, not here. Have enough dignity to admit that you bet on the wrong horse. You put all your love and money into Bianca, and you treated me like dirt. And now, you have to live with the result. I turned away from the bed, looking at the exit sign glowing red in the distance. I just came to tell you that the foreclosure is final. You have nowhere to go when you are discharged. But I am sure you are tough enough to handle it. After all, you taught me everything I know about survival, right? The 30-day grace period evaporated like water on hot asphalt. The morning of the eviction did not bring a moving van for the Vance family. Instead, it brought a sheriff's cruiser and a team of asset recovery specialists hired by my holding company. I was not there in person. I did not need to be. My presence was felt in every legal document and every seizure tag that was currently being slapped onto the furniture I now owned. Desmond stood in the grand foyer, holding a single plastic bin containing his socks and underwear. He looked at the antique grandfather clock that had stood by the door for 20 years. He reached out to touch the wood one last time, but a deputy stepped in front of him. "Don't touch the assets, sir," the officer said, his voice bored and routine. "That clock is property of the bank now. You are permitted to remove personal clothing and toiletries only. Everything else stays to satisfy the outstanding debt." Patricia was weeping in the corner, clutching a garment bag to her chest. She had tried to slip a silver picture frame into her purse earlier, but the recovery team had caught her. They had forced her to empty her pockets like a common shoplifter. "Put it back, ma'am," the agent had said. "That is theft. Do not make us handcuff you on your way out." She had dropped the silver, her hands shaking, letting it clang against the floor. Now she stood shivering in the air conditioning, stripped of her heirlooms and her dignity. Then came Bianca. She was struggling down the curved marble staircase, dragging two massive suitcases. She looked exhausted, her face puffy from weeks of crying, but she was determined. She hauled the luggage to the door, blocking the exit. "These are my bags," she declared, her voice shrill and desperate. "They are personal items. You cannot keep my purses. They are gifts. They are mine." A man in a sharp gray suit stepped forward. He was the asset appraiser I had hired to inventory the estate. He held a digital tablet and looked at Bianca with tired eyes. "Open the cases, please," he requested. Bianca unzipped them, revealing rows of colorful leather handbags with famous logos. Hermès, Chanel, Louis Vuitton. She looked at the deputy defiantly. "See? They are my clothes. Accessories count as clothes. I am taking them." The appraiser put on a pair of white cotton gloves and picked up a bright orange bag that Bianca claimed was a Birkin. He examined the stitching. He checked the hardware. He looked at the serial number tag inside. Then he let out a short scoff and tossed the bag back into the suitcase with absolutely no care. "You can keep them," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "We do not seize counterfeit goods. It is against company policy to resell illegal replicas." Bianca froze. "What are you talking about?" she screeched. "That is a Birkin. Preston gave it to me for our 6-month anniversary. It cost $20,000. "You are lying." The appraiser laughed, shaking his head. "That bag cost $50 on a street corner in Chinatown, miss. It is vinyl, not leather. The stitching is uneven. The hardware is plastic." He picked up another one. "Fake. And this one. Fake. In fact, looking at this collection, I would say your fiancé never bought you a single authentic designer item in his life. They are all cheap knockoffs. Just like him, they have no resale value. We don't want them." Bianca stared at the pile of bags, her most prized possessions. They were supposed to be her safety net, her investment portfolio. She realized then that even the love tokens were lies. She wasn't carrying a fortune. She was carrying garbage. She screamed a sound of pure frustration and kicked the suitcase, sending the fake bag spilling across the marble floor. "Time to go," the deputy announced, checking his watch. "You are trespassing now. Move it along." They walked out the front door, carrying their trash bags of clothes, leaving the fake luxury behind. The heavy oak door slammed shut with a final resounding thud. The electronic lock clicked, engaging the deadbolt. I watched the feed from the security camera one last time before instructing the system to cut the connection. The house was mine, the debt was settled, and the Vances were finally exactly where they belonged, on the other side of the gate looking in. The pavement was hard against the soles of my shoes, which were no longer Italian leather, but cheap synthetic material I had bought from a discount bin. I walked out of the fifth interview of the week with the same burning sensation of humiliation in my chest. The hiring manager at the high-end fashion boutique had not even looked at my resume. She had simply pulled out her phone and played the video that had been trending for a month. The video of me screaming on the floor of the Onyx Club, ripping my dress and acting like a banshee. She had laughed a dry, cruel sound and told me that their brand represented elegance, not hysteria. She said I was a liability. She said I was a meme. I had no choice but to lower my standards. I lowered them past the boutiques, past the reception jobs, past the retail counters, until I hit the very bottom. I found myself sitting in a gray fabric cubicle that smelled of dust and despair inside a massive telemarketing center on the outskirts of the city. My job was to cold call people during their dinner, knowing they hated me before I even said hello. I was selling extended car warranties, a scam almost as transparent as the life I used to live. The headset pinched my ears, and the fluorescent lights buzzed with a headache-inducing flicker. I dialed the next number on the list, my fingers stiff. A woman answered, and before I could finish the first sentence of the script, she screamed at me to get a real job and hung up. I sighed, letting the mask slip for a second, rolling my eyes at the ceiling. "Excuse me," a voice barked from behind me, making me jump. I spun around to see Mr. Jenkins, my floor manager. He was a short man with a stain on his tie and a power complex that rivaled my father's. He was holding a clipboard and looking at me with pure disdain. "Did I pay you to sigh?" he asked, his voice loud enough for the entire row of cubicles to hear. "Did I hire you to sit there and look bored?" I felt a flash of the old Bianca rise up. "Do not talk to me like that," I snapped instinctively. "You have no idea who I am." Mr. Jenkins laughed. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. You are the girl who became famous for being a loser. But in here you are just operator number 429, and right now you are failing to meet your quota. You are rude to the customers, you are slow on the dialer, and you have an attitude problem that I am about to fix by firing you if you do not pick up that phone right now." He leaned in closer, invading my personal space just like I used to do to my maids. "You are replaceable, Bianca. There is a line of people outside waiting for this chair. So you can either put a smile in your voice and sell some warranties, or you can take your box and go back to the street. Do you understand me?" I looked around the room. I saw the other operators watching me, some with pity, some with amusement. I saw the drab gray walls. I saw my own reflection in the dark computer monitor, tired and defeated. I remembered how I used to make Aaliyah clean my shoes. I remembered how I yelled at the servers at my wedding. I remembered the power I thought I had. It was gone. I was the help now. I was the one being yelled at. I was the one who had to swallow my pride just to survive. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back. I could not afford to cry. I needed this paycheck. "I understand, Mr. Jenkins," I said, my voice small and trembling. "It will not happen again." He sneered, satisfied with my submission, and walked away. I adjusted my headset, took a deep breath, and dialed the next number, praying that whoever answered would be kind, because I finally knew what it felt like to be nothing. The gavel struck the wooden block with a sound that signaled the end of the world for Preston. It was a sharp, final note that cut through his murmurs of protest. The judge looked down at him with eyes that had seen 1,000 con artists before, and found nothing special in this one. 10 years in federal prison for wire fraud, identity theft, and racketeering. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Preston slumped in his chair, the arrogant smirk that had been his trademark finally wiped clean, replaced by the hollow stare of a man watching his future dissolve into gray concrete. 2 weeks later, the reality of his new life had set in. The designer suits were gone, replaced by a bright orange jumpsuit that scratched his skin and smelled of industrial detergent. The expansive views of the city were traded for iron bars and a toilet he had to share with a stranger. He was no longer Mr. van der Hoven, the heir to a fortune. He was inmate number 784. The desperation clawed at his throat every minute of every day. He needed a way out. He needed a lifeline. He used his commissary privileges to buy a phone card. His hands shook as he punched the numbers into the battered wall phone in the chaotic common room. He didn't call his parents knowing they had blocked his number years ago. He didn't call Bianca knowing she had nothing left to give him. He dialed the only number that mattered. He dialed the woman who had put him here. The phone rang 3 times before it was answered. Aaliyah speaking. Her voice was cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the shouting and clanging of the prison block behind him. "Aaliyah, it is me," Preston whispered, huddled against the wall, trying to shield the conversation from the other inmates. "Please don't hang up. You have to listen to me. I am in hell here. They put me in general population. I can't survive this. You know I am not built for this place." He waited for a response, but there was only silence on the line. He took it as permission to continue his frantic begging. "I can make a deal." He rushed on the words, tumbling out over each other. "I know things, Aaliyah. I know about other scams. I know people who owe me favors. If you post my bail, if you get me a good lawyer, I can pay you back. I will sign whatever you want. I will be your servant. Just get me out of here. Please, I am begging you. Look, I am sorry about the wedding. I am sorry about everything. Just show some mercy. You won. You proved your point. Now please save me." He stopped breathing heavily, clutching the receiver like it was an oxygen mask. He waited for her to yell or to laugh or to offer a sliver of hope. On the other end of the line, sitting in her penthouse office, Aaliyah looked at the phone in her hand. She took a slow sip of her tea, looking out at the city she now ruled. She didn't feel anger anymore. She didn't feel triumph. She just felt bored. "Preston," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "You seem to be under the impression that we are negotiating. We are not. You are where you belong." "But Aaliyah," he sobbed. "Please." "This is a collect call, Preston," she interrupted. "And frankly, you aren't worth the connection fee. This call is costing me money and I have better things to invest in than a bad memory. Don't call this number again." She tapped the screen, ending the call. The line went dead in Preston's ear. He stood there for a long moment, listening to the dial tone, the sound of absolute isolation. He slowly hung up the phone and looked around at the cold, unforgiving walls of his cage. The line was cut. The show was over. And he was finally alone. The radiator in the corner of the cramped living room hissed like a dying snake, spitting steam against the peeling yellow wallpaper that was curling at the edges. The air in the tiny apartment smelled of damp carpet and stale cooking grease, a heavy odor that clung to clothes and seeped into pores. It was the kind of smell you could taste. Desmond sat at the wobbly laminate table, staring at a stack of overdue utility bills, his face illuminated by the harsh light of a single flickering bulb. He was counting the crumpled dollar bills in his wallet for the 3rd time, hoping the math would somehow change, but it remained stubbornly the same. They had $40 to last until the end of the month. Patricia stood by the sink, trying to scrub a stubborn stain off a plastic plate. Her signature French manicure was gone, replaced by chipped nails and red, rough skin from harsh detergents. She slammed the plate down into the soapy water, sending a splash onto the dirty linoleum floor. "This water is freezing, Desmond," she snapped without turning around. "The landlord said he would fix the boiler yesterday. Why haven't you called him again? You are sitting there doing nothing while I freeze to death in this rat hole." Desmond slammed his hand on the table, sending the bills sliding across the fake wood surface. "I called him 3 times, Patricia," he shouted back, his voice echoing off the thin walls. "He does not care. He knows we have bad credit. He knows we have nowhere else to go. And I am not doing nothing. I am trying to figure out how to buy groceries. Unless you want to eat instant noodles again tonight, get off my back. Patricia wiped her wet hands on her stained apron and turned to face him, her face twisted with a bitterness that had become her permanent expression. You are useless, Desmond, she hissed. You call yourself a businessman. You walked around like you owned the world, but you let your own daughter outsmart you. You let her steal everything we built. If you had been smarter, if you had read the contracts properly, we would still be in Buckhead. I would be drinking wine in my garden instead of scrubbing grime off someone else's floor. Desmond laughed, a harsh barking sound that lacked any humor. Me. It is my fault. You are the one who insisted on the wedding, Patricia. You are the one who needed to show off for your friends. Buy Bianca the dress, Desmond. Get the biggest flowers, Desmond. You spoiled that girl until she was rotten. If you had raised her to work instead of acting like a princess, maybe she could help us now. But no, she is answering phones for minimum wage because she has no skills. You created a monster, and that monster ate our retirement. Patricia gasped, clutching her chest. Don't you dare blame Bianca. She is a victim in this too. She was deceived just like us. Desmond stood up, kicking his cheap metal chair back. We are all victims of your vanity. Look around you, Patricia. Look at this place. The leaking ceiling, the cockroaches in the cupboard. This is exactly where we sent Aaliyah 10 years ago. We threw her into this filth and told her to sink or swim. We laughed at her poverty. Well, now we are the ones drowning. And the funniest part is we deserve it. He grabbed his coat, a tattered wool trench that had seen better days. I am going out, he muttered, heading for the door. Where are you going? Patricia demanded, her voice rising to a shriek. To the bar, Desmond replied without looking back. To spend our last $10 on a drink, because listening to you is more expensive than being broke. He slammed the thin plywood door, shaking the whole apartment, leaving Patricia alone, in the silence of their ruin, listening to the radiator hiss. The evening breeze felt different tonight. It wasn't heavy with the scent of old money and desperate pretension anymore. It felt clean. I stood on the limestone balcony, overlooking the sprawling, manicured gardens that used to belong to a club defined by exclusion. Above me, the neon sign buzzed softly, but the name Onyx was gone forever. In its place, burning in a brilliant, defiant gold, was a new name. The Phoenix. I had gutted the place. The heavy velvet drapes that smelled of cigars and secrets were in a dumpster somewhere. The gold leaf statues of cherubs were replaced by modern art created by local sculptors. I didn't just buy the building, I scrubbed its soul. I turned a monument to vanity into a sanctuary for merit. I turned back to the room behind me. It wasn't filled with social climbers or fake friends or people who only loved me when I was useful. It was filled with the people who had stood by me when I had nothing but a jagged scar on my hand and a plan in my head. Thomas, my lawyer, was laughing with Reynolds, the investigator. Tyrell was out of uniform, holding a glass of sparkling water, looking relaxed for the first time in months. Sarah, my assistant, was actually sitting down enjoying the view she helped purchase. This was my circle, small, tight, and unbreakable. I picked up my glass of champagne. It was a vintage bottle, the kind my father used to hoard in his cellar but never drink because he was saving it for a special occasion that never came. I tapped the glass with my nail, a sharp, clear sound that silenced the room, not out of fear, but out of respect. To the fire, I said, raising the glass and meeting their eyes, and to everything we built from the ashes. They raised their glasses in unison. To the Phoenix, they echoed. We drank not to destroy enemies, but to celebrate survival. I walked back to the railing, looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there in a cold, cramped apartment, my parents were probably arguing over pennies, blaming each other for their downfall. Somewhere in a gray cubicle, Bianca was learning the value of $1 the hard way. And somewhere in a concrete cell, Preston was staring at a wall, wondering where it all went wrong. I searched my heart for them. I looked for a trace of sadness or a lingering wish for reconciliation. I looked for the need to go to them and offer a hand up. I found nothing. There was no anger anymore, but there was no forgiveness either. I didn't hate them. I had simply outgrown them. They were characters in a story I had finished writing. I had closed the book and put it back on the shelf. I did not need their love to be whole, and I did not need their apology to be at peace. Justice had been served, and that was enough. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool night air. I remembered the girl who walked away in the rain 10 years ago, shivering and scared with mud on her clothes. I wished I could go back and tell her that it was going to be okay, that she didn't need their umbrella because she was going to become the storm. I set my glass down on the railing and smiled at the horizon. The past was paid for, the debt was settled, the future was unwritten, and it was entirely mine. I was finally free. The most profound lesson from Aaliyah's journey is that a legacy built on lies is destined to collapse. The Vance family and Preston spent their lives curating an illusion of wealth and status, believing that arrogance could mask their moral bankruptcy. They underestimated Aaliyah because they valued the appearance of power over the substance of character. However, as the story proves, you cannot fake your way to the top forever. Eventually, the bill always comes due. Aaliyah's victory teaches us that true worth is not found in the validation of others, even family, but in the empire you build with your own hands. She demonstrates that the best revenge is not noise or violence, but absolute, undeniable success. By cutting the toxic ties that held her back, she showed that self-preservation is not selfish, it is necessary. In the end, dignity is the only currency that cannot be counterfeited, and integrity is the only investment that guarantees a return. If you were in Aaliyah's shoes, would you have walked away like she did, or would you have offered your family one last chance? Let us know in the comments below.